As mentioned, my name's James Harris, and I coordinate a social group in Sydney called Effective Altruism Sydney. And we're part of a growing movement around the world. It's sort of began in the early 2000s. It's been around as something named and extant for less than 20 years, but it's a follow-on of humanism. It's a follow-on of any number of different philosophical, ethical, social movements across the last many centuries of just trying to do charity, philanthropy, all of the stuff that we know we want to do well in the world better. And it's inherently non-political because everybody has their own opinion of what a perfect world would look like. So you could have a thoroughly small government approach, a thoroughly large government communist approach where, somehow the state is going to fix everything. You might think that the state can fix nothing and shouldn't exist. It's immaterial in many ways to what the next little bit of incremental good you can do is in the mind of many effective altruists. So whatever you do with your human capital, your own personal resources in terms of how you spend your time and how you want to change the world in a broader sense, EA is often very focused on how do I just give $1 to do good. If you're walking past a homeless person in the street and you feel guilty, but you're like, is it actually the best thing I can do to improve this person or any person's lot in life to just give them $1? Evaluating those sorts of decisions, evaluating how to do incremental good without looking at the broader changes is often part of what EA is about. Although there's a growing group as well who do look at policy interventions and how you can change the world through political means. If you click. So that's, in a very, very short nutshell, what I consider effective altruism to be. But it's best defined, and if you take one thing away from me talking at you today, ignore me talking and just go grab this book, because I think it's really quite an influential and interesting book. It's basically a preface on how you can do charitable work through any number of different ways as effectively as possible, really evaluating the good that you're going to do. So from, again, my own personal perspective, that's cosmopolitanism. I know open borders is an open question for a lot of libertarians, but to the EA mindset, people are people and they all deserve to be cared for in some way or another. And that's not saying that the state should care for them. It's saying that if I walk past a person in the street, I do feel empathy for them, and I feel that that person, as much as any other person in the world, is deserving of my sympathy, my empathy, my compassion, as is the topic today. Rationality, though, is this sort of discerning feature for effective altruists, that we want to do these things, as Austin was saying, in the most rational way. Not just saying, this is my tribe, this is how I believe I'll do good, but really taking apart, what are the outcomes? What am I actually doing, and how is that going to propagate and actually lead to something good in the world? And along that line, impact optimization, cost effectiveness. Where is this dollar I'm spending going, and could I put it somewhere that is more effectual at the end of the day? And finally, cause neutrality. I mean, you need to be open to different causes if you're going to be able to invest in the most effective cause. If I've spent the last 5 years researching malarial interventions, and I know one malarial intervention from another to the nth degree, I can pick the top one out of 30, but someone comes along and they've got some evidence for me that, this education intervention is twice as effective at improving people's lot in life. I can't just stick with malaria just because it's what I know is good. Like, there may be a lot of value in me contributing further time to that research in that area of interventions, but if I had $1 to spend, I'd probably go with the education initiative if the evidence showed strongly that it was a better option. And part of what effective altruism is about is amassing that evidence, because how do you even quantitatively evaluate whether an education intervention or a malaria intervention is something that's going to have a positive impact? So I was thinking about compassion, because I always talk in terms of empathy when I'm talking about the driving forces behind effective altruism. And I was wondering, what's the real difference between empathy and compassion? And one of the interim solutions I came to, that compassion is just empathy with action, that everybody feels empathy. And if you'd click, if you were to see a child drowning in a lake, you wouldn't have to think too much before taking action. You're going to jump in and save that child drowning in the lake. Even if you are wearing a $1,000 suit and have a $1,000 phone in your pocket, and you know that they're going to be trashed, you're going to be ruined once you jump in this lake, everybody in this room, I'd like to think, is going to save the drowning child. And this is a thought experiment from a philosopher named Peter Singer. And he obviously then extrapolates that to say, well, there's the obvious drowning child, but how broadly do we expand that circle? Do we consider that an obligation, or is that just something that we all instinctively do as sympathetic, empathetic, compassionate human beings? And that is one of the big open conversations in effective altruism. How do you expand that circle? Where do you draw the limits? Do you stop saving the drowning child because you'd rather save, 3 children in Africa who might have malnutrition? There's no simple answers to it, but just opening the door to that kind of conversation and saying, how do I do good in the world now that I recognize I am a person who would save the drowning child, I am a person who is empathetic, compassionate. That's the difficulty and the reason that effective altruism takes up so much of my time, because it's something you can think about until the cows come home, to be perfectly honest. So those are those two big questions, and I'll have a quick look at a few superficial ways that we can evaluate who does deserve our compassion and how do we dole out our compassion. So I don't want to bore you all with ethics, because I'm sure there are plenty of people in the room who are probably more educated than me when it comes to ethics. I know there's a lot of sort of egoists and various other people within the broader libertarian movement, and there's probably some people who have never even heard of utilitarianism, don't want to have a bar of it. So I'm not going to bore you, but to give you a quick overhead, here's three sort of broadly popular domains within ethics. People generally like to break simplistic versions of ethics down into these three things, which are your sort of rules, duties, and rights-based approaches to ethics. That's largely the law. You've got your virtue ethics, your personal traits, and your consequentialist ethics, which is all about your sort of predicted outcomes. Now, focusing on the rules, duties, and rights, this is often what people fall back on, is, well, that's what ethics is all about, right? It's about knowing what's the good thing to do in any given situation. But as you all know, the law isn't us. Generally, no matter how complex a set of rules you might want to make for how you should behave or what people are entitled to or what people should be protected from, all of these rules have edge cases that fail. There's, centuries, if not millennia, of philosophical work into how do we do ethics better, and no deontological system, no system of rules, duties, and rights has ever been complete. People don't agree on ethics yet. So clearly this approach that probably has the most legs out of all of them is not comprehensive. It's valuable. We all want to live in a state with laws, but it doesn't do the job. Next up, we have virtue ethics. And, personal favourite. Oh, I cut that quote in the end. Go back.
Go forward,
yep.
back.
Go back, yep. So a personal favourite quote of mine is that he has all of the virtues that he has all of the vices that I admire and none of all of the virtues that I disdain and none of the vices that I admire, sorry. So that was Winston Churchill. Sorry, I should have mentioned at the start, I'm also a little under the weather, so I'm struggling today. But essentially, yeah, so virtue ethics is a very interesting framework and it can lead to a lot of interesting conversations, but it doesn't actually give a lot of those sort of deontological rule-based, how do I behave in a given situation? It can give you a lot of information about personal development and how to become the sort of person you want to be, how to evaluate other people as whether you think they're fitting for a certain role in life, whether that's in a corporation or a state or otherwise. But it doesn't tell you how do I act in this particular given set of circumstances in a way that will have the best possible outcomes. One thing that these three systems to me brings to mind in terms of virtue ethics, though, Aristotle had a concept called the golden mean, which is that between any two vices, the mean between two vices of excess and deficiency is what is considered virtuous. And I feel that deontology, rule-based systems fall prey to dogmatism. Virtue-based systems can fall prey to acquiescence, that you get so caught up in what does a good person look like that you don't actually engage in proactive action. You lose that compassionate empathy plus action side of things. And so to my mind, the virtue in all ethics is responsibility, just having some sense of I am an agent in this world who can make change and I will be responsible in the way in which I make change. And that brings us to the third and favourite, sidebar, before we get to my third and favourite broad domain of ethics, learned helplessness is something that many people look at charity and they say, it's all too hard. There are so many fake or ineffective charities out there. There have been scams, there have been various different charities that have been recognised time and again as having huge administrative overcosts. There's these charity muggers who stand at the top of escalators and try to get you to give money when really a fraction of a percent of that money is getting recycled through the system to doing positive things in the world and actual interventions. I feel like the biggest problem we have in direct action in the world is learned helplessness, that people aren't sure of where to give their time, their money, and they just sort of give up. And a lot of people, unfortunately, look at state-based aid as a solution to this somehow. They say, oh, well, we have a foreign aid budget, so I don't need to give my money to starving Africans. And none of these things are actually helpful or productive. And to my mind, the biggest thing that effective altruism brings to the table for the average person is just a way of getting out of that cycle of learned helplessness and saying, well, actually, there are open book, transparent, highly effective charities out there that we can engage with and really have large demonstrable impacts in the world. So yeah, just bringing that responsibility back into arm's reach, because sometimes it's not the child that's drowning, it's us who's drowning in, waves of information about thousands of different charities, many of which may be totally ineffective. Just amassing that body of people and knowledge and work on how do we actually tease out the effective interventions and contribute to them. That's what effective altruism to me is all about. So then getting down to the predicted outcomes, these consequentialist ethics. People may have heard of the term moral calculus, doing the moral calculus on something, whether the inputs and the potential negatives outweigh the good that can come of doing a particular thing. Within effective altruism and public health, a particularly useful metric, though very hard to come by a reasonable estimate for, is the quality adjusted life years that you will get with a given intervention. So if I were to look at how many adjusted life years, looking both at the quality of that life and the overall life extension, a particular intervention will have, a really common example, and it's a bit grim to pick on a particular charity, but is seeing eye dogs for the blind. Costs about $50,000 to train up a seeing eye dog for the blind. The Fred Hollows Foundation can surgically intervene in someone's glaucoma or various other conditions for about $25 in the developing world. That's literally, once they're established and running, costs about $25 per surgery to restore sight permanently from someone who is currently blind. When you look at $50,000 versus 25, you've got a 2,000 times multiplier in the effectiveness of those interventions. And you can try and draw a virtue framework around that. You can say, oh, well, I have no duty to take care of this person in the developing world, whereas this, happy, fortunate person with a puppy is in my immediate circle, so I'm going to look after them. But when you just break it down to the numbers, it's very hard to justify only pursuing certain kinds of interventions when there's a growing body of work demonstrating just how much impact we can have. And so that brings us to the sort of 5 main areas, in my opinion, of what effective altruists get invested in. Cause prioritization being the big one, figuring out within whatever given domain, how do we have the greatest impact we can. Global health, obviously, is where a lot of, the causes of absent human flourishing, you might say, are across the world. Similarly, global poverty, that, people just aren't doing well when they have malaria, when they have schistosomiasis, when they can't afford to feed their children. Animal suffering is one that Gabe will touch on later. A lot of people within the effective altruist movement don't just say that, my circle expands to all humans on the planet. They say my circle expands to animals. Like, you have probably seen a dog or a cat suffer at some point. If you step on a pet's tail, it is not without suffering. And that is probably something that deserves some moral weight in all of our regards. So I won't harp on that because Gabe's going to hopefully investigate it in a great deal of depth after this. And then finally, global catastrophic risks are a growing point of focus for a lot of people within the EA movement, because we look at things in terms of predicted outcomes, and if you're saying, oh, well, I'd rather save 10,000 sick people now, what if you could save the entire population of the Earth, even at a 1 to 10 chance? There's all sorts of tricky math you can do there, and whether that aligns with your own personal values is something that falls to each of us within the movement. But yep, that's
you can finish it.
Yeah, that's pretty much all the time I have for. Sorry, I'm speaking a lot more wendingly than I normally would due to illness. But there's all sorts of organisations. The last one that I really will focus on for you is eaaustralia.org.au. If you give these guys a click and have a look at Give Directly particularly, I know that within the libertarian movement, universal basic income is something a lot of people have very conflicting opinions on, and the evidence for it is really, really thin, to be perfectly honest. And an effective altruist charity called Give Directly is actually engaged in one of the largest UBI trials, universal basic income trials in the world at the moment in Kenya, basically looking at what impact that has, what are the lasting impacts, what are the changes to social circumstances and health and welfare outcomes. So give them a look if you do want to both align with your libertarian values and give to a poverty alleviation charity. That's one worth your investigation, if not your dollar. And that's me.